Welcome my friends, Evan Gray here. I am in the midst of traveling from Colorado down to Florida. I just crossed the border into Alabama at a rest stop here, and behind me is a giant rocket. This is a Saturn 1B. Let me show you. You can see the size of this rocket here where the cars are parked down below. This is a full-scale Saturn 1B. The Saturn series of rockets, for those of you who are not nuts about aerospace and rockets like I am, was one of the first rockets in preparation to go to the moon. So when they were doing their initial testing of all the components, they created the Saturn 1 series, which its purpose was to go up to Earth orbit and to be able to go around and do the experiments. This one was never really intended to go to the moon, but just to get the capsule up, test all the components, make sure everything was working, and then ultimately it was the Saturn V, which is a much larger rocket, that went to the moon several times. So today, traveling across the border down the interstate, heading from up in Tennessee and crossing Alabama on my way down to Florida. This is right on the freeway and one of the rest stops here. So there's a rest stop, a welcome center, welcome to Alabama, and then this giant rocket on display here. This is the rocket itself. You can see there's a fence around it. Back over here is the freeway, and you can see the size of this thing. It's absolutely huge. What some of you may not know is that in a former life, prior to my starting my full-time nomadic living, I owned a rocket science publishing company called Rocketeer Media. So I owned that from about 2000 up till 2009, when a combination of the collapse of the economy in 2008 and everybody switching out of paper media to digital media, those two combined factors pretty much crushed the publication, and I went out of business. So during that time, I published a magazine, a full-color magazine. Later it was part color, part black and white. But it was 84 issues of a full-fledged magazine with international distribution over to Europe and Canada and the United States. So I was probably the second or third, maybe the third largest aerospace publication during that period of time. And my focus was mostly on individuals who want to build rockets to go to outer space. So those of you who are YouTube subscribers, if you wanted to build a rocket in North America, particularly United States, how would you go about doing that and launching it into outer space? Most of these, the plan would be without a human payload. So let's say you want to put a camera up there, you want to put a barometric pressure sensor, do atmospheric experiments, things like that. There's a whole series of these rockets called CANSAT rockets done through universities for people doing their master's and PhD programs for aeroscience and aerospace. And so people don't want to do this. That was my magazine, was for that crowd, and it dealt with everything from the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, and all their regulations to get permits to launch a rocket into outer space, all the permits you need from the BATF, the explosive permits, DOT, Department of Transportation permits, storage magazines, all of that kind of stuff was in my publication, and a number of books. I created a book series, booklets, or smaller booklets for different topics like vertical trajectory systems, camera payload systems, things for optimal flight. So, you know, for instance, if you're going supersonic, you want a different size nose cone than subsonic, which is a rounded nose cone. So there's all sorts of factors involved in rocket science. It's a fascinating, amazing thing. So for a period of 9 years, I had this magazine, book series, and video documentaries. I did 4 video documentaries with interviews with rocket scientists building rockets and stuff like that, and launching them. And so that was my focus for a number of years, and then stepped away from that to do world travel. So I just absolutely love this kind of stuff, and fascinated with what the government did back in the 1960s and 70s with the development of manned spaceflight and orbital spaceflight, which is just quite phenomenal. Just as I was getting out of rocket science was when Burt Rutan was developing all the technology for Spaceship One, Eagle One for Virgin Galactic, and setting up the Space Launch Center in New Mexico for launching privately and small business type rockets for space tourism, which is another whole interesting thing developed around hybrid rocket technology, nitrous oxide and solid fuels, which are some things that I dabbled with actually when I was building my rockets. So anyway, fun stuff. So I am traveling from Colorado down to Florida for the winter. I have 3 rental properties in Florida, and all 3 of them are in need of some attention at this point. One of the properties, which you saw that I worked on last time, the tenant is moving early, and so I'm going down to look for replacement tenants for that property, and currently doing showings and interviews and applications for that. So that is becoming available the end of this month in October. Property number 2 developed a leak in the roof, so it looks like I've got to file an insurance claim and get a new roof. Property number 3, the tenant's lease is coming up to end, and I've decided not to renew that. There's been a number of complications and difficulties with this tenant. One of the main ones being that they backed a car into the front of the house and did about $20,000 worth of damage. So I've got to deal with all of the repairs there. It's taken months and months to get the insurance money. It's almost 5 months in. I just barely got an insurance check, and it's really not going to be enough to cover the repairs. So I've got to go down and oversee that, getting the tenants out of there at the end of the lease, doing the repairs, and then getting new tenants in. So it's going to be a number of months I'll be in Florida, and then after that I have some huge new projects in the works that I'm super excited about, and I'll be telling you about those near the end of time in Florida, so look forward to that. So that's all I have for this episode. It was mostly just an update letting you know what I'm doing, and just wanted to show off that Saturn 1B and talk a little bit about my history with rocket science. I have so many strange, eclectic stories to tell about my past life that you just would, it's mind-boggling, I think, to me as well as to others. So anyway, that's all I have for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Savor the moment, and I'll see you in a future video.